Hello, this is Wormatty, and today I am looking at DR Facility V1's VMF to see if we can't reduce some edicts. The reason I'm doing this is because during a playtest yesterday, unfortunately, we had too many edicts and a plugin of mine decided that the best course of action was to change the map. On any other Deathrun server, this would likely have the map removed from their rotation because it risks the server crashing, and no community operator wants their server crashing because they'll naturally lose players if it happens all the time. So when this plugin detects there's the potential for an edict overflow, what it does is it dumps all the current edict tallies, or tally rather, to the console so we can have a look at it to see what's going on. So there are a few things here that stand out. As you can see, there's 99 ambient generic. Those are the entities which can play sounds. There's 51 beam, which is an entity belonging to the point spotlight graphical effect, which unfortunately is still communicated to clients. And there's other stuff as well. There's 84 funk brush, some funk illusionary there, which may not be needed. 42 funk fizz boxes. Info target, which may not be needed either, because typically info targets are used for things like lasers, but you can replace those with logic relay. And the good thing about logic relay is it doesn't consume an edict. It's a server-side entity, so that's an easy win. Info teleport destination, again, can also be replaced with logic relay, provided you add angles to it. Keyframe rope, that is, along with move rope, is an entity belonging to ropes, and unfortunately those are communicated to players, even though in the vast majority of cases they're purely decorative. It's just an engine thing, or a game thing rather. Path tracks we can disregard. Fizz bone followers is a fairly straightforward fix. We often get that with Deathrun maps. Lots and lots of prop dynamics there, 244. That's a bit strange. 61 TF point weapon mimic, could probably slim that down a bit. And everything else is either caused by players or not really worth worrying about. Trigger add TF player condition, there's 32 of those. I wonder if we can't replace some of those with some VScript. We've got lots of triggers as well. So I did this previously and I wrote a bit of a summary, so this is the stuff that we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on reducing these entities right here, the ambient generic, the funk brush, prop dynamics, and TF point weapon mimic. And the triggers, we're going to see if we can slim those down a bit by combining some of them. And we also have some funk fizz boxes and so on, and I've got some notes there. So first off, let's look at the info targets, and it's in alphabetical order, so I don't know why I'm taking so long to find them. I'll just copy that because I can't be bothered to type. So we've got the map open in Hammer. We go to the entity report tool and we look for point entities by class, paste that in there. This will show all of the info targets in the map. So we've got info target, there's one called beam, catapult targets, catapult target, killer spike, poopy fall, etc. So let's just go to them and have a look and see what they're used for. So this one here, info target beam, this must be an env laser and it's set to go to the beam entity, so that target can be replaced with a logic relay easily. Catapult target, this one is used for a trigger catapult, I'm guessing. Ooh. Yep, trigger catapult, and its target is catapult target 1. Killer spike 1. What's that used for? Ah, this is the area where you come out of the wall, isn't it? Yeah. What's this entity? This is a trigger push. Okay, so let's hide that. What's beneath this funk brush? Why is this a funk brush? Get rid of these prop statics. Oh, more water. Not entirely sure what this is used for. Oh, we've got some lines here. And it's called Killer Spike. So this is a soundscape. Okay. So you're using that as a position for a sound, Killer Spike 1. Okay, well, I'm going to leave that, but I think that functionality does not work in Team Fortress 2. But if it does work, then maybe you can replace those with logic relays, but I'll let you have a look at that. Poopy Fall. Crikey, what's going on here? This is another catapult target. Yep, okay. So we'll go to water targets. And these are used for soundscape positions again. Okay. Alright, so I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to select all of the info targets which are used as target entities for catapults and lasers. I'm going to turn them into logic relay. So now if I click on beam, you'll see it's a logic relay with the same name. And if I go to it, that's fine. Same with Poopy Fall. Fantastic. So that's taking care of those, or most of those anyway. Info teleport destination. Now, the only thing we have to worry about here is whether or not they're parented to anything. If they're parented, well, we might be able to use logic relays. I haven't used parented logic relays for a while, so I don't quite remember if they're necessary. Okay, well, that's obviously not. Arena teleport is just a teleport area. Doesn't appear to be parented or sent anywhere. Boxes teleport destination. Tailwind, Humi, Hobby, etc. Secret room escape. Okay, so I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Let's go to the first one. And you can see at the moment it has a pitch, a yaw, and a roll. 0, 270, 0. So what we're going to do, we're going to use this as our test to see if it retains the angles key value after we change it to a logic relay. Ah, it's a shame. Okay. So we'll change that back, if possible. Okay, good stuff. So at the moment, if we turn off Smart Edit, you can see we only have the following key values. So maybe what we could do is we can open the VMF in, say, VS Code. And we can look for info teleport destination. So you have an ID, that's fine, that's shared by every point entity. Angles, target name, origin, and these bits and pieces here. They are also used by logic relay. So what we could do is we could do a find replace in this document and replace all the info teleport destination with logic relays. The only thing I'm concerned about is whether or not that would break something. Because VMFs these days in Hammer++, they have a special character for I/O. So I'm not entirely sure if we can get away with that, but I think you might be okay. But I'm not going to do it here. I'll let you experiment with that in your own time. I wonder if we turn this into a logic relay with Smart Edit disabled, if it'll retain the angles. No, sadly not. Oh, it's a shame. Okay, one more thing we'll try then. Is we'll do a find and replace. We'll replace info teleport destination. It does not find class names, it only finds target names, which is fine. Never mind. Okay, well, we'll have to come back to that one. So, well, you'll have to see if you can sort that out yourself. Ambient generic, we'll come back to later on. Info teleport destination, func illusionary. 28 of those. Let's have a look, see what's going on there. And that is a brush entity. So none of these are named, which means they don't receive instructions. Okay, so this does not appear to serve any purpose. CP mana window glow. How very strange. Okay, so func illusionary is an old entity. It's just a brush which is non-solid. That's all it is. But it was kind of taken over by a func brush. If you look at the wiki page for it, it'll say this entity is deprecated. So I don't think you really need to use func illusory for these details. You're better off just using a bog standard world brush, really. They don't need to be non-solid. Again, here I'm not sure why you've used func illusionary. Very strange. You're creating dynamic brush entities for no apparent reason. This I would turn into a func detail just by pressing Ctrl T, which would tie it to an entity. And the default one in Hammer is func detail. This is, again, I'm not entirely sure why this exists. Does this need to be non-solid? Probably not. And you've got perhaps a situation where you do actually need a non-solid wall. If you were using a lot of these, then I would tell you to use a specially crafted VMT which compiles non-solid, and then apply that to the world brush and then turn it into a func detail. And what that'll do is it'll just make a non-solid brush. And the good thing about that is that it blends in its shading with all the brushes around it, compared with using it on a dynamic object. Sorry, using a dynamic brush like func illusory or func brush. Yeah, again, there doesn't seem to be a need to use that here either. Alright, so I'm going to say what you should do is go through each of your func illusionaries. If they don't need to be non-solid, i.e. players aren't going to be passing through them, then just turn them into detail brushes or world brushes, preferably world brushes. Unless they cause silly viz leaves. That looks like a very strange reason to use func illusionary. Okay. That was an easy one. Fizz Bone Follower. Okay, this is a very easy one as well. As you can read on the description here, they're caused by prop dynamic player models and should be disabled in their properties as they are not needed. So the simplest solution here is to go to the entity report, search all point entities for prop dynamic, and then it just closes. Great stuff. Select the first one, scroll down, select the final one, and press properties. And here you've got, yeah, I don't think that Smart Edit is on. Oh yes, it is. There you go. Okay, let's do that again. And then if you go to Disable Bone Followers, that's already on 1 for some reason. That's strange. That means that every... Why are they... Oh, that's because I've selected ornaments at the same time. Ah, okay. There we are. Right. My apologies. Prop dynamic. and then scroll down and you should have disable bone followers. Yes, okay, so they've all got disable bone followers. How very strange. So maybe it's the ornaments then. Oh, perhaps you already did this. Okay, well if you did, congratulations, well done. You know, if you're so inclined, what you might want to do is create a custom version of the FGD and then set the default value for prop dynamic for this key value here to yes. Because there's no reason I know of to have bone followers. Trigger add TF player condition and trigger teleports. You've got 42 of those. It's going to be quite in depth. So let's look at your trigger hertz. This one is less simple. And you have 56 of those. This one does 99999 damage. Its damage type is club. It's set to do everything, that's good. I mean, it's not necessary, but it helps to prevent people from building in them because it also does damage to buildings. And to go to the next one, we've got swing box, that's parented to this. And this one here is lava, so that's got its own settings as well. Shock. More shocking. Okay, you've combined this into two entities, that's fine, that's good. Burn damage. Okay. Well, it looks like we're not going to be making many savings here. But if you have, say, trigger hertz, a bunch of trigger hertz, which are in more or less the same area, and they each have the same setting, so they use the same damage amount, damage type, and everything else is the same as well, then you can select all of them, and you can tie them all to the same entity. What's this? 99999 apostrophe. Which you have done here. Alright. Doesn't look like we can do much about this though, because they're all special. 66 trigger multiple. You might have legitimate reasons for having all these. This is the game, the race area, and this opens and closes something called Race Blockade 1. Oh yes, it's this thing that rises out the ground. Okay. I think from memory you had quite a few of these blockade things. So one thing you could do is you could make a VScript. And what you'd do is you would apply this VScript to the func door entity scripts, and you'd set the script think function. You don't have to actually, you can just... Anyway, sorry, start again. Create a VScript for these doors, and then when the minigame is started, you send an input to all of these doors, and you do call script function, and then you give it a function name. And then what we'll do is we'll create a script. And what that script will do is it will begin checking every 0.1 of a second to see if there are any players in proximity to the door. And if it finds that there's at least one player in proximity to the door, it will open it. And then as soon as there are no players in proximity, it will close it again. And the good thing about that is that the script can be reused on each of these entities. So you don't need to use a trigger to open it or close it. The downside is that I can see here you've got very deliberate positioning of this. So if somebody was to go around it, well, they'd have to be in this trigger area here in order for it to come up, which means that the way I'm suggesting is you'd have a radius. So it would be, say, what's the length of this? 384. It would be, say, 400 units radius, which means as well as including anybody on this side of the door, it would also include those on the bottom and the side and so on. Maybe that's fine, in which case a V script would probably help you to get rid of all these triggers. And V scripts, of course, don't use edicts. They're loaded by the entities. You can do a lot with V script. It's really good. So tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to zoom out so I can see the whole of the race area. Oh, this is rather elaborate, isn't it? I'll open the properties as well, and I'll scroll through each of these trigger multiples. Set damage filter, fall filter. Let's go to that. Interesting. Okay. I see what you're doing there. All right. Test ball pusher, enable, disable. Fair enough. Race lap trigger. Ah, race lap trigger. Interesting. How does this work? Player 1, player 2, player 3. Interesting. You could probably replace some of these with a script, and I guess if this is one trigger per lap, instead what you could have is you could have the lap stored on the player itself, so that when a player goes through a single trigger, it sees what lap they're on and it adds one to it and so on. And if they reach the maximum number of laps, it does whatever victory condition you've got. So that would reduce the number of triggers here from 7 to 1, probably. So you'd have a saving there of 12. But it's not a great deal of edicts, is it? So not really worth worrying about, I'd say. Trigger once, 61 trigger onces. Why do you have so many trigger once? What could you possibly be triggering once? Arena horse train. On trigger, start forward, play sound, activator, add output 5000, on trigger, arena text, etc. This is a block. That's a button. Interesting. And you have a trigger once, and underneath that you have a trigger multiple. Okay, so this is parented, named, not filtered clients. So what you could do is your trigger once logic, you could move all that into a logic relay, and then you could add an output to this trigger multiple here on start touch, and then trigger that logic relay. And you can set the number of refires to 1, so it only gets fired once. And then in the logic relay, you can go onto the spawn flags of the logic relay and set that to fire once, which means that as soon as the logic relay is fired, it'll be deleted and it won't be fireable again. So that's one way to get rid of one trigger once there. And of course, logic relays don't consume edicts, so you can use them as many times as you like. Scout, scary, push, enable. Spinning platform, start forward. Alright, well that makes sense. Yep, this is that makes complete sense. This is a zone trigger. The heck? Not quite sure what's going on here. This is something. In any case, if you have a trigger, oh, that's a fairly large trigger. It's a hurt trigger, right? Okay. All right. Well, again, that's fine. So, well, use the example on the Trojan horse. If you can make use of existing entities, use logic relays and single refire periods, you can actually set as many refires as you want, by the way. Then that will help you to use fewer trigger onces occasionally. But it looks like you're not going to be able to get rid of most of them. You do have legitimate uses for them. Bunk fizz boxes. Ah, I see. Again, you've got more. You've got the vents. Trap 9 ball, 3 of those. This, which is multiple pieces of a door. Yeah. Not a lot you can do there. That's not 42, is it? Surely. 46. Okay, fair enough. 10 to 0 cards. Whoa. That's pretty cool. So, yeah, you've got different colors. Okay, fine. Well, that makes sense. I was going to say that if you have multiple of the same object, you can put them into a point template, and you can use an env entity maker, place down some logic relays, and in the logic relays, put an output to the entity maker, and you can force it to spawn its associated point template at the origin of the logic relay, which is very useful. It means you can templateise something and then spawn it wherever you like in the map. All you have to do is supply the target name of an entity you need to spawn at, or call an output from the entity using the caller parameter. Info teleport destination, and that we've looked at. Player conditions. So adding and removing player conditions is one of the easiest things you can do in VScript, and it's one of the most useful, I would say. You've got quite a few here with no target names, which means they're not designed to be toggled. Okay, they are parented though. So what does this thing do? This adds the condition invulnerable for 30 seconds. It's parented to super bottle, whatever that is. On start touch, super bottle break, super bottle kill hierarchy. So you need to use this as a trigger, so we'll skip this one. This one gives you speed boost. All over this area, wherever this area is. Oh, this must be for the activator, I suppose. -1, okay. So what you can do here is you can use VScript to give the activator the speed boost condition. Very simple. What you can do is you can do it in your teleportation logic. So when the blue person is teleported, if say you have a logic relay, you can add a line in there. So this is, oh, it's not triggered, okay. Let's look at your teleport destination. Blue area. All right, well, I'm just going to just quickly demonstrate how simple it is. Imagine this is just any old logic entity, and you're just creating an output. So we'll use on start touch as the trigger. Target's entities named activator. And then run script code. You can do lines of code here directly. It's really really clever. So when you run some vscript from Hammer, the game passes the activator as a special parameter called activator. So in this case, the activator is a player. So what we'll do is we shall go to the list of vscript conditions. Or did I put it in here? Let's be slow today. Add cond, I think it is. Yeah, okay. So that's a method of the CTF player class. Very simply, add cond, and then you just put the condition. There's also add cond x, which allows you to specify a duration, but we don't need that here. So what we'll do is we shall go back to Hammer. We'll grab the condition name. Oh, actually, we're not going to be able to do that, are we? Forgive me. So we'll do activator, and remember this is a method of the player class. So we do add cond, and then we need the name of the speed boost condition. So if we go to the list of constants and we type speed, we can see TF speed boost. And the way we access the condition, the constant, is by typing ETF cond dot and then TF con speed boost. I'm pretty sure that's how you do it. I can't quite remember that offhand. There might be more to it. If so, I apologize. Anyway, yeah, so we'll put a bracket, a close bracket on there. This is not a string, this is an enum. It's a variable stored in the vscript's virtual machine root table. So that's the reason why we're not putting quotes around it. Although if we did need to specify a string, then we'd use the backtick in place of double quotes, because you can't do double quotes in Hammer. So we apply that, and that's what it looks like. So what happens here is when this person touches this trigger, it does activator, run the script code, and then on the activator it runs the add cond method, and for the condition it uses this enum value, this constant, etfcons.tfcon speed boost. And then because this is a minigame, you don't really have to worry about taking the speed condition away from the activator. When players respawn, their conditions are removed, so that's fine. But if you wanted to take the speed boost condition away, then you could easily do that just by using remove cond, I believe. Oops. Ta-da! And then just specify the name of the condition again. Problem solved. So with that in mind, you can try to use that example for other things. The bad thing about the condition trigger in Hammer is that you have to have one trigger for every condition or every attribute you want to add to players, which is a pain. Whereas with vscript, you can just do this using logic. It's very simple. So hopefully you can find ways to slim down, or in fact entirely remove in some cases, the condition trigger. Again, here you've got a condition trigger, although this is actually you're using this as a trigger anyway, so that's not a good example, but you get the idea anyway. Trigger teleport. You've got a lot of trigger teleports. That might be necessary. Yeah, I suppose it is when you think about it. You're teleporting the activator around occasionally, so they're probably necessary as well. And even if you wanted to use vscript to replace that, you'd still need to use some kind of trigger, which is unfortunate, so we can skip over those. Funk brush. You've got a lot of funk brush. Hopefully you're using them all for good reasons. So this is a funk brush. Not entirely sure what purpose this serves. I'm guessing it's because it's supposed to be a water volume. This is a funk crock. Yeah, I see what you're doing. You're wanting to make some kind of liquid. What are you using as the material? Water nuclear waste 001. I wonder, do you actually need to? And is that something that you've downloaded yourself? It's an unlit generic, compile water. Okay, well, I'm not sure, but I think you might be able to just treat this as a world brush. The same way you would with any other water. So you would leave every other side as no draw, and you would only texture the top with the nuclear waste, and then it should just function as water. Aside from that, yeah, okay. So what was I doing? This one, ooh, where are we? You appear, yeah, okay, so you're doing the same thing here. You're using a funk brush as a kind of water brush, and because you want something to be non-solid. But if you look at the water/waterfall material, which is built into the game, water/waterfall. It's an unlit generic, and base texture, surface property is water. Model 1, okay. I think if I recall correctly, this is actually non-solid already. So again, you probably only need to make it a world brush. This is the solid variety. The difference being that oh, solid as in opaque. Okay. Hang on, that's exactly the same. This one has translucent 1 commented out. This one does not. Model 1, translucent 1. Okay, it's there. No cull. Right, okay, so the difference is that waterfall has no cull. No cull being you can see the texture from both the other side. Although I can't, obviously. That doesn't really help, does it? You have some funk brushes here. They're set to never solid. I guess this is because you don't want people to hit their head. I'm not sure why that is needed. You could just pull a clip tool brush over the bottom of these. How very strange. This is always solid, blast door, and it has an input. No. Output? No. Okay. What is its purpose? That is a funk brush. Putis block wall. Start disabled. Input. Okay. Right. Okay. So it's a kind of Funk Viz. What's it called? Respawn room visualizer. This funk brush is just used for collision, apparently. Always solid. Oh, parented to blast door. Okay. And this prop dynamic has been scaled up, hence it has no collision, which is why you're using a funk brush. Very well done. Okay, so we'll skip over that one. So this one again, you're using because you don't want people to be able to stand on it, which is fine. There is a trick I can give you. If you come with me into my custom content, where is it? Curious. Oh, where did I put that? Okay. Maybe it's on my old hard drive then. Anyway, okay. Never mind. Tell you what we'll do. Compile non-solid. This is a material parameter. And what you can do is you can add this to your VMT. Oops. And then you put 1. And what that does, I think you have to put 1. Add this VMT parameter to make brushes non-solid. When compiling the map, VBSP will flag the brush with this material as non-solid, useful for foliage or light effects. Unlike a brush tied to Funk Illusionary, a World Spawn or Funk Detail brush with compile non-solid does not count as an edict. So you can make a custom variant of this material. Metal I-beam 002, find that in GCFscape. Extract it, put it somewhere handy in your custom content directory, open it in Notepad or something, and add compile non-solid to it, and retexture these brushes with that material, and turn it into a funk detail. And when it's compiled, it will be non-solid. And as the VDC says, it will not consume an edict. You can probably get away with doing that in your nuclear wastewater as well. But again, I don't think you need to do that. Oh, I see. You've made the FX color. I wonder if that's really necessary. What does that do exactly? You make it more green? Or does it make it less colourful for you? Is that what you were trying to go for? Okay, you were trying to colorize it. Well, in that case, what you can do is you can make a custom variant of this VMT. You can use the color parameter, and I think it's a set of square brackets surrounded by quotes, and you can put in RGB values. So here, you could copy the RGB values, and I think you have to separate them with commas. I can't quite remember. It's different depending on whether it's a float or an integer. Yeah, so if it's an integer, you surround them with curly braces and you put the integers in. But if it's a float value, you surround them with square brackets. So in actual fact, there would be no commas, and it would be curly braces. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. So this is a very simple and clever way for you to reuse existing materials and just change their colour. So if you have a material or a texture that you're wanting to reuse yourself that you're making, then what you can do is you can make the texture grayscale and you can colorize it using the material. So it then can be any color you like. Very useful for things like building blocks. This funk brush is never solid. This is used, presumably this is not solid either. This prop dynamic collision's not solid. Okay, well, we're going to come back to prop dynamics later on, aren't we? Would it be the end of the world if people were to hit this? Do you need to have this? What's this? Funked or rotating? Oh, okay, that's interesting. Spinning sign, and this changes. Okay, well, that's interesting. Well, again, you can make a variant of this which uses compile non-solid. Here you have some lovely emissive materials. They're always solid, and you've colorized them again, so that's the reason why. I see. Okay, so again, just use the color trick there, make a custom VMT. This is non-solid. Presumably you're trying to avoid people from getting stuck on this by making it non-solid. So what I suggest you do here is just make this a funk detail, and instead just use a clip brush. So let's browse for Tools Clip. Actually, we'll make this the height of the... Oh, you've already got a clip here, actually, so you could just extend it. But I will, just for demonstration purposes, make a very small clip brush here. So people would not get stuck on that whatsoever. That's fine. It doesn't matter that there's a few units here or there. People won't really notice the difference. And if you're concerned about that, what you can do is you can use the vertex editing tool, Shift V, to move that inwards. And then as people approach this, they will naturally get pushed off it into the middle. So this funk brush is more... Oh, okay, you've used this as a... so what I suggest you do here, this is never solid. Interesting, okay. And, so if people go inside it, they hit the trigger brush. Right, okay, that's clever. What I suggest you do there is turn this into a pickle, Morty! Turn myself into a pickle! No, select all the faces that you want to keep. Did I do that right? Okay, displacement. We'll start again. Hold Shift and... it's not working. Maybe because I'm... Okay, so I need to select all these brushes right there. Displacement. Bum, bum, bum. Oh, because I'm using the wrong button, that's why. I'm in Hammer, it's Control to select multiple things, and then click Create, and it turns them into a displacement. You'll have to kind of move these around yourself. Oh, it's because it's not a four-sided brush. Displacements have to be made from four-sided brushes, so you'll have to use the sewing and the paint geometry tools to move this out. So, and then what you do is you just put no hull collision, I think, no hull, no ray, no physics, and that will make it completely non-solid. And the good thing about displacements is that they, again, do not consume edicts. So they're a very simple way of making something non-solid. And in fact, now that I think about it, you could have done that on all the other brushes as well that I told you to make compile non-solid materials. You could just turn those into displacements. Just make sure you select only the faces that you wish to remain using the displacements select thing. Don't select the whole brush because it'll turn every brush face into a displacement, and you don't need all faces, you know. Yeah. So yeah, with the nuclear waste, you'd have to use the color anyway. Color VMT parameter. Here you've got a skip door which has no inputs apparently, but is somehow usable, func breakable. Right, okay. So presumably when this is broken, skip door. Weird. Func brush, that's strange. Don't quite understand what that's for. Anyway, I think I've spent enough time on func brushes. You get the general idea of what you can do. So I think now we're just on to, okay, we'll do prop dynamics last. Point weapon mimic. That's a point entity. Got lots of obby rockets. Obby rocket 1, 1.5, lots of damage. That's insane. And do these all share the same values? Yes, they appear to. They just have different names, which is fine because they all are, they're individually addressable using the buttons and so on. So what I suggest you do is, let's say you have a bank of rocket spawners. So this is obby rocket 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 8. Okay, so you've got a bank of 5. What I suggest you do is create 5 of these somewhere. So let's move these off to their own little area. We'll name them obby rockets. And what we'll do is we'll create a point template. Point templates are not edicts. They are server-side entities because they do not need to be communicated to players. We'll call it template obby rockets. And we'll get the name of the obby rockets entity and we'll put it in here. Don't remove template entities, leave that one unchecked. Preserve entity names, don't do name fix up. Leave that. Sorry, disable that. So then what we do is we create an end entity maker. Oops. We'll call it maker obby rockets. The point template to spawn is this one. Alright, and then what we'll do is we'll go back to here and we'll get rid of all these and we'll put a logic relay. And we'll move it into position. Oops. So roughly the same area where the rockets, the center of the rockets would be. We'll call it name obby, oh, we'll call it relay. I always do that because it helps with wildcarding things. Obby rockets 1. Flag. Only trigger once. Allow fast retrigger. Makes no difference. Leave those alone. Add output on trigger, and we'll send it to the maker. we'll do for spawn at entity origin. And then for the parameter, we'll do caller, which is the logic relay itself. So when this input is sent to the entity maker, it will go, right, you want me to force spawn my template at the origin of a specific entity. Which entity would you like me to spawn it at? And then you say caller, and then in this case, the logic relay itself will be passed. So these rockets will spawn here. And then what you do is, one thing actually is, I'll just get the angles key value from this. Does not appear to have angles. Oh, pitch your roll, it's 0. So that's fine. This is the default position to the right, so we'll leave that alone. But if it was, say, rotated 180 degrees, what we'd do is we'd get the angles, and then we'd add that to the logic relay with smart edit off, add angles, and then we'd paste that in, and then you'd see that. So that would be fine. So let's just remove that. So yeah, when this is fired, it will spawn the rocket spawners in that position there. And you might be thinking, well, that's great, but that just means that every time I hit that button, it's going to spawn some rocket spawners, which is silly. They're not going to do anything, and you're just going to end up with loads and loads and loads. So what we'll do is we'll have another logic relay. We'll name that relay obby rockets, and we'll do only trigger once. Output on trigger on spawn obby rockets. Fire once. So what will happen is, as soon as this is spawned by the point template, it will output to the obby rockets here, and it will tell them to fire once. And then once they've been fired, this logic relay will delete itself. And what you'll want to do is also add on spawn obby rockets kill, with a delay of, say, 0.1 seconds. And you might be thinking, well, all of these are called obby rockets, so that just means these are all going to be called obby rockets. So if I spawn 2 at once, that just means they're going to fire each other and delete each other multiple times. Well, that's not the case, because in the point template, you notice earlier we said, oh, okay, sorry, disable that. We don't want to preserve the entity names. We want to use something called fixup. So any entity spawned by this point template will have a number added on to the end of their target name, which means they're unique in the world and can be sent inputs uniquely as well. And any other entities in the point template which have outputs that point to entities, other entities in the template, will have their outputs modified so that the target names are also fixed up as well. So if these obby rockets are called obby rocket &01, then the logic relay will output the fire once output to the obby rockets &01 entity. So yeah, so then when pressing the button, you just modify the button's on-pressed ability, and you go to on-pressed logic relay here, trigger, and that will do everything for you. So instead of having obby rocket 9 fire once, you'd replace that with telling the logic relay to trigger. And what it'll do is it'll spawn the obby rockets, it will fire them, and then it will kill them straight after, which means that you don't have, say, 20 rockets just sitting here idle. You only have 5 at the very beginning of the map when the round restarts, and then they're immediately deleted. So that's a saving there of quite a few edicts. TF point weapon mimic. Yeah, you still have quite a few, don't you? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's what I've just created, isn't it? So if we select all those, we can see that's 45. Okay, that's quite a lot. That's a huge saving of 40. You can do the same with others as well, but if you've only got a few of them, then it's probably not really worth the effort. Here, you could probably do the same. You could have, say, 8 logic relays or more. Or in fact, maybe the best thing to do is just to have a reduced number of logic relays and then just fire them, sorry, logic relays, a reduced number of grenade spawners and fire them multiple times. So you get the same quantity of grenades. I think that takes care of that. Ambient generics are a bit more tricky because they're used for sounds in the world. So they kind of need a position in the world in order to emit from. So there are tricks you can use on Earth. There are tricks you can use to try to reduce the number of ambient generics in use. One of them is use VScript to emit sounds from certain entities. So let's say this entity is here, announcer cap, and it's play everywhere, and you're playing the raw MP3 file. Instead of playing announcer voice lines from an ambient generic, there is an input to TF game rules that you can use instead. And this input is designed to allow you to send audio files to all players, or even just players on one team. And it's called Play VO. You can do red or blue or just Play VO. All you need, oh well, it accepts the real file paths as well, but you can just specify the sound script or the raw file path as the parameter if you prefer. Send that input to the TF game rules entity, and that will play to all players, and it will use the play everywhere flag by default. It plays globally to people. So that cuts edicts out right there for any announcer voice line that you have. But just a recommendation, if you're going to be using announcer voice lines, try to use the sound scripts instead. The sound scripts have built-in settings like volume, pitch, and also the channel to use, which ensure that they're played at the right volume, but they also prevent them from overlapping each other. So if you play 2 announcer voice lines at once, then only one will be heard. And you can find the announcer voice lines sound scripts in the miscellaneous VPK somewhere in here. Scripts, I think. Game sounds could be game sounds VO or game sounds announce. What I suggest you do is open GCFscape, open this miscellaneous file, and then just extract everything into a folder, because it's very useful to have I only did scripts actually and materials, but it just means that I can do a search for particular file names, or I can open Notepad++ and search within files if I wanted to find a particular. Here we are, let's have a look. MVM tank. If I have a copy of that and then search in here, Game Sounds VO, and then if I search for that, you can find the announcer voice line here. It's or sound script game sound name it's called. So you'd copy that, and you can see that it's configured to use Chan Voice 2 and so on. And it also has another good feature of sound scripts is they specify multiple file names to play at random, so you have more than one voice line that can be played. Bomb door sound. Okay. Race minigame counter 1. Announcer begins. Yep, so that's another good saving there. These are just announcer voice lines, so you can use Play VO for those. And if you've got music, then Yeah, you'll want to stick to an ambient generic there. But if you've got multiple ambient generics for use with music files, then you can use VScript to play different music files using just a single ambient generic entity. Or in fact, if we're going down that route, you can use VScript to actually play your sounds and music. So if you wanted sound to come out of a particular entity, like here for instance, you've got trap 1 sound. When this is on pressed play sound, ambient generic Denman Laugh Evil 01, what you could do instead is if you go to this button, then you can create an output on pressed, and then you can target, let's say, one of these spawners. Because it's an edict, so it's present on the side of the clients, and you can do run script code, and again you can just use VScript to play sounds. So I think it's play sound. No, it emits sound. And this, the simplest of the sound emission functions is just emit sound and then a string to the name of the sound. A bracket and then a backtick and then the string and then close brackets. So that will play the sound at the position of, well, it will cause the TF point weapon mimic to play that sound. The only downside is that if you're using an ambient generic, you can specify things like volume and stuff, but here you've got default properties anyway. Ficool would recommend that you use emit sound X instead, which is a larger function. It's a bit more complicated, but we can provide you with the information on how to use that. But I suggest just trying emit sound for the time being and see how that works. So lastly, I think we're on to prop dynamics. And I save this until the very end. I think I might have spoken to you about these prop dynamics in the past, and I think I worked out that most of them you did actually need to keep. So if we go to the first one, this is it's a piece of railing that's been scaled up by 2, and that is the reason why you're using prop dynamic, is because you need it to be larger. That's understandable. But you've got quite a few of these. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can burn through them quite quickly. This is a flag, and it's animated, so it needs to be prop dynamic. This bottle is part of a game mode. Sewer cap, that's been scaled up. Okay, that's understandable. This has been scaled up as well, yeah. Do you know what? I think you're ahead of the Source Engine here. If you had, say, Unreal Engine or something, then you'd be set for life, because Unreal Engine is amazing. You can just place down static meshes, adjust them however you like. I tell you what we really need is a way to recompile static meshes or prop statics into new versions. I think it might be on the horizon, but I'm not sure. Should be doable anyway. Prop dynamic here. Okay, so that's been scaled down as well. So I think what I'm going to suggest, I think that has to be dynamic, is going to be a lot of work. But in any situation where you require a prop simply for decoration, ideally it should be a prop static. because they don't use edicts. But the problem, of course, there is that you cannot scale them. At least you can't scale them at the moment. If we had a modified version of VBSP or something, it might be possible, but I'm not entirely sure. So one option available to you is you could take all of these static props that you're using, you could decompile them and then recompile them with a modified QC file where you insert a scale parameter and you set the scale that you want, and then you give them a name which makes them unique, so they're not using the same file name or file path as the old version. So put it in a file specific to your map name, for instance, and then you'd pack them into the map. Now, this does increase the file size of the map a bit, but if they're only small props, it shouldn't really be a major difference anyway. The downside there, of course, is that it's time consuming, but hopefully you've been able to free up quite a lot of edicts using other means. So before we finish, what I'd like to do is I'd just like to go over a list of edicts that I found earlier on. Where did I get it from? Oh, I thought I pasted it in. Okay, well, I'll get it, go and grab it from the server. The server! See, what I've done here is I've got a special plugin that I made. And what it does is it dumps every edict at every index, even those which have been killed. See, the problem is when you type sv dump edicts, it only shows you the edicts which are currently active. And the num edicts, oh no, I did do this, didn't I? Yeah, the num edicts shows you the peak index, which is great. So 2005, as you can see here, which is when the map changed the server changed the map. But it doesn't show you edicts which have been spawned and then killed later on. And when the round restarts, that is the time when you have the most edicts. So it's helpful to have a plugin which can keep track of all the edicts which have been killed. So that is what I created. This is a list of all the edicts in each of the indexes, including those that have been freed up. It has their class name and also the target name. Now, edict indexes are assigned in the order that the edicts are asked to be spawned. So the first 32 indexes are player indexes. So those are reserved for players. And then the first few edicts are taken up by game mode edicts, which are spawned by the game before the map is loaded. And then you have all of the edicts spawned by the map. And they're usually spawned in the order that they appear in the VMF. So here you can see you've got some prop dynamics. And then you've got TF point weapon mimics here. Now, some of these may have been freed up later on. I don't have any indication here as to whether or not they were killed and put into templates or anything, but the important thing is that these edicts, when the round was restarted, consumed edict indexes, even if it was temporary, and you can see that it went up to about 1,740, and that's on an idle server. So if we just go through these and see if there's anything extra that we might have missed. So we've already covered the TF point weapon mimic, and the fierce bone followers, the keyframe ropes, teleport destinations, ambient generics we've talked about, more prop dynamics, funk doors, triggers, multis. I think I'm going to have to scroll through this pretty quickly to see if there's anything else. There's bone follower here that don't need to exist, which I presume you've already addressed. Ambient generics, more ropes, funk brushes, more funk illusionaries, bone followers, ambient generic, prop dynamic, path track, which unfortunately is entirely necessary most of the time, unless you can slim things down. I presume most of them are used by a motivator, but honestly, I don't remember seeing a motivator during the playtest, so I don't know if you've got a traditional motivator or not. Condition triggers here, funk illusionaries, spotlight ends, beam. Yeah, I'll talk about those in a second. Point teleports, that's fine. You can use VScript to teleport people in place of point teleports, but you're only using a few point teleports, so it doesn't really matter. They're really convenient. Okay, so we've reached the end here, and as you can see, after most things were spawned, you then had the spotlight ends and beams, but they don't appear. Spotlight end does not appear in the edict dump from the fake crash, but we do have beam. We've got 51 of those. So point spotlight, the graphical entity, which consists of a sprite, well, two sprites, and they're both visible depending on how you look at them, what angle, consists of 3 edicts, or used to consist of 3 edicts. It consisted of the beam, which is the kind of conical thing, spotlight ends, and then the point spotlight entity itself. But there was an update released for Team Fortress 2 some time ago that slimmed it down. So now they only consist of 1 edict, which is the beam, and the other 2 don't exist anymore. Although if you name them or you parent them to something, then they are transmitted to players fully. All of the edicts are transmitted to players, I believe. I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, so we can see here that you've just got you're not using inputs or outputs. You're not naming them or anything. So they're used purely for decoration. Even though they don't spawn 3 edicts per point spotlight anymore, they do still spawn 1 edict. So you've got 50 there. And apparently, when the server, when the round restart happens, you still have the spotlight end spawning, and then it gets deleted afterwards. But the process of spawning these entities and then deleting them still causes the peak edict index to go up, unfortunately, even though the spotlight ends won't be around anymore during a round. So you're going to have to bear that in mind. Hopefully the reductions that you will have done after watching this video will bring you into a nice safe threshold. But if you're struggling, then you could always get rid of some of these. Or better, actually, you could replace them with an env sprite. So here you've got a point spotlight. Keep pressing the wrong buttons. And this, I don't think from this distance it's necessary, because it's just a detail. See, the point spotlight is the sprite itself, which is this big round thing that's clipping into the nearby geometry. And then you also have the cone that comes out. And when you're side on with the point spotlight, you see the cone. But when you're level with it, you see the sprite. But because you're never going to be level, it makes sense just to replace the point spotlight with a sprite instead, an env sprite. However, considering that the player comes down here and then uses these obstacles and stuff, I don't think they'll be inclined to notice these details. So if I were you, I would just get rid of them, the point spotlights from here. I don't think they're going to make any difference. No one's going to notice them. I certainly didn't. If the light fixture was around and in the player's face, then I think it would be more noticeable. But here, I don't think it's worth keeping them. Yeah, so that should help to reduce edicts as well. Wonderful. So I think that pretty much covers everything. I'll just quickly go over it. Yeah. All right. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the Discord server. but this should be most, if not all, the information you need.